We mentioned, speaking of the aim of life as something not salvation but fulfillment. I've been thinking of it since there was a question about the bodily transformation, the cells, and how the transformation of the, immortality of consciousness is communicated to the immortality of the body. I would like to complete that theme before passing on to others, and that is the secret of life is progress, moving from one stage of consciousness to a higher stage of consciousness, and there is no end. We put ends to suit our limited human mental function. There are immediate ends and further ends, but there can't be something like a final end. And the process of life in achieving this progress is self-renewal. Life renews itself, and all that mind, our science can do is to give sinews, the necessary technique, supply for this renewal. Where life fails to renew itself for any reason, like the decay caused by disease, disintegration, decay, or willful gap created between a persistent deformation on the surface being and the innate urge of the soul to proceed on the path of truth, if we willfully persist in ignoring the inner call, the inner bell, and persist in the deflection, the deviation outside, it can't renew itself. So what happens? The soul or the inner life discards that frame, and thus death comes. Death is a process of life where death becomes imperative for life to renew itself. If the form in which the life is encased is malleable, adaptable, then death is not necessary. That is why destruction is inevitable and indispensable as long as we live in ignorance. Wherever there is destruction, you can be sure there is an ignorance and falsehood, which is an extreme result of that ignorance, making it imperative. But once ignorance recedes and there is more and more of knowledge, destruction ceases to be a law. There is always a progress from stage to higher stage, from light to greater light, from freedom to greater freedom. And construction, constant construction, is the law. So death always indicates existence of ignorance, of something, a deformation. The will of God, the will of the divine is infinite, eternal. Where there has to be a destruction, it means there is the presence of a deformation. And it is to enable this constant renewal of life towards a perfection and a perfection is always moving and moving. Liberation is not the aim of life. Liberation can give a capital and a foundation step. Liberation from ignorance, liberation from nature, liberation from mechanical activity. It gives us a certain standpoint, a basis, a foundation on which we proceed to erect an edifice of a developing perfection. It is in that context that we have to understand the need for the perfection of the body. We understand the need for the perfection of the mind. An error-free mind, a mind which never be bored, a mind which always has interest, we always cherish that. And wow, when you get bored with the thing, when you feel idle, it means the mind is not progressing. The mind is stagnating. When you feel time fleeting, when you feel everything rapid about you, it means mind is proceeding rapidly, progressing. So we understand the need for perfecting the mind, perfecting emotions, unfaltering love, a never-ending compassion and benevolence, kindness. We understand a life activity which cannot be named, which is not arrested, but a continual flow of life energy. Similarly, the body, it has always to be supple, it has always to be supportive, it has always to withstand whatever pressures and demands are made upon it, and that calls for a certain perfection of the body, which has been neglected in our civilization. The Greeks, ancient Greeks, had a certain perception of this, what I would call the aesthesis of physical culture. They always gave importance to physical proportions, to physical rhythm, to beauty in the physical, all as a part of physical perfection. And they dreamed that a day would come when the body built with so much care, nourished, doesn't have to be cast aside. One can do it, but it should not die. So these are some of the, what I would call remarks as a postscript to what I said in the morning. If you have any questions, we will come to that during the question hour. To continue our theme, the third condition is truth. To always speak the truth. And one can't always speak the truth unless one thinks in the direction of truth. One feels in the mold of truth. Truth, an exactness of body, mind and speech. This is not a moral maxim. It has a spiritual connotation. Because God is truth. The divine is truth. And if we want to realize the divine, we have at least to hold the truth as our ideal, live the truth to the best of our understanding, and express the truth. Deviation from it, we have got expressions in the way that they say, those who speak the truth and those who practice the truth, their path is straight, undeviating from truth. But those who deviate, devious are the ways of sin. There are 100 ways, but the path of truth is one, direct. Now, a person who wants to have the right background of meditation should have truth inwoven in his life. And once you start developing the habit of speaking the truth, you arrive at what is called the power of truth. That is, whatever you speak comes true. This is called Vak Siddhi in Sanskrit. That means a person who habitually speaks the truth, whatever he speaks comes true. Power, his speech develops a power which effectuates itself, whether one was wise enough to speak that or not is another matter. But that speech fulfills itself. Now, to tell the truth does not mean that you have to speak the truth that you know all the time, irrespective of time and space. There are times when it is not prudent, it is not politic to tell the truth. But at that time we must have the courage to remain silent. The truth force gives one that confidence and that strength to hold oneself in silence. This is a spiritual quality. And even in jokes, in fun, one doesn't speak untruth. I would like to point out a subtle distinction between a lie and a falsehood. Now, falsehood is a deliberate perversion of truth, and that is most unspiritual. But a lie is born of weakness, not of wickedness. The person is afraid to tell or admit something, he tells a lie. So it is a moral failure, not a spiritual failure. There is no wickedness in it. There is a weakness to own up. So this distinction should always be kept in mind before we judge people. For ourselves, we must always rigorous standards of self-judging. But when we judge others, we have to be extremely charitable. That is as far as truth is concerned. The next is not non-stealing. Naturally, they don't mean physical stealing, but appropriation of what belongs to others. Even a mental grasp which is of somebody else's, to seek to own it, to cast that glance of appropriation, that is itself creates certain vibrations in us which are not very healthy. And another is receiving of loaded gifts. Gifts that we receive are not all overflowing with love. There are calculated gifts. There are what are called loaded gifts. And in receiving a loaded gift, we lay ourselves under obligation to those who gift things to us. And in that we walk into the aura or walk into the influence and the hold of people who themselves may not carry presences very favorable to your ideal. Thereafter comes the positive injunctions, and first is contentment. One must have a basic contentment with what one finds oneself in life. That is, one must recognize that one is where he is, the will of God. God always chooses those circumstances for his seeker which are the best for his spiritual evolution. So one has to have a basic acceptance of things in which one is placed. It does not mean that one should not try to improve one's life, prospects of life, but not have that fevered excitement and agitation of always competing with the neighbor, of trying to do one better than one's neighbor. That kind of fevered, what is called the participation in the rat race, that is totally foreign to a temperament that is required for meditational disciplines. A basic contentment, that you accept everything as the will of God. If you try to improve, that also is the will of God. But there shall not be that inner dissatisfaction in life, dissatisfaction with oneself and those around, and with ultimately in effect with God himself. That is contentment. And next is what is called cleanliness. Now this is not a physical act of physical cleaning, but an inner psychological cleanliness. In this tradition, they speak of clean food. In the Upanishads, we have got an interesting passage in which they say, by the cleanliness of food comes purity. By the purity of food comes purity of being. By the purity of being, there is a tranquility of consciousness. And when there is tranquility in consciousness, the knots in the heart are loosened. Now, the commentators explain that this is not kitchen food that is meant, but it is psychological food. The kind of ideas, emotions, imaginations that one has, that determines the stuff of one's being. That decides the way one responds to situations, the way one reacts to things. This is extremely important, to examine oneself. How far one's thoughts and the psychological food that one has constantly, every second, every minute, is consistent with the ideal that one holds before oneself. In this context, the question of food, the physical food that we take, is also important in this. The food that we take always carries with it the vibrations, the atmosphere of the persons who cook it, who serve it. Not to speak of the things before that. And as far as non-vegetarian food is concerned, however mercifully you may try to kill an animal or say that you killed that animal, the resentment, the anger, the revulsion, the frustration that the creature feels at the moment it is killed, that is bound to enter into the flesh of the animal. And even if you boil it 100 times, this poison, vitiation, is bound to remain, and when it enters into the human body, it communicates itself to the human consciousness, makes it prone to that anger, to that agitation, to that excitation, brings down the consciousness, and does make a difference. That is why spiritual seekers are advised normally to avoid non-vegetarian food. But of course, in India we have found that wherever seekers from the West have switched over suddenly to vegetarian food from their accustomed non-vegetarian food, they have developed other problems of digestion, problems of liver, and so we always ask them to make a graded transition. First, avoid the more gross foods like beef, which makes the whole thing very gross and dense. They are advised to have less harmful foods like eggs, like fish. The principle is, I was asked by somebody a few minutes ago, the principle of vegetarianism, it is not that vegetarianism is not a fad as others make it out to be. The principle is, you should interfere less as possible with the economy of nature. Nature is an evolving process. With great pains it develops life. Articulate life, it takes long time. So the lower the form of life that you eat, the better you serve the purpose of nature. It is a law of life that life feeds upon life. Life needs to, in our present organization of the universe, life sustains itself on life. Life needs to nourish itself on life. It is called the law, the logic of the fish. Now, the lower the order of life that you eat, the less you interfere with nature. The higher the order, the more you interfere. That is the basic truth behind vegetarianism, that it is serving the economy of nature, the law of nature first. Second, your own spiritual health, your own mental health. It keeps unpoisoned by these but I just missed that word, whatever it is, those poisons, psychological poisons of anger, resentment, vindictiveness, grief, all of them travel, communicate themselves through flesh. So this is to be avoided. And third is what is called ascesis. Ascesis is the Greek word for an inner concentrated discipline. Whatever you want to achieve, whether it is spiritual or non-spiritual, it goes without saying that if you want to achieve it, you have to make it the main interest of your life. You have to learn to concentrate your energies and focus them on the subject, on the thing that you have in mind. And this marshaled concentration for a particular purpose of your energies is called the ascesis. So if one wants to meditate, if one wants to pray, if one wants to develop knowledge of science, or whatever it is, one has to devote one's energies in a concentrated manner. Without inner discipline, one can achieve nothing. We may talk of freedom, we may talk nobody can impose any order on us, discipline on us, but without an inner discipline, it is impossible to make much headway. This is a concentrated discipline. If you have particular hours, you must be very sincere about it. At that time you should do nothing else. All the energies of the body, all the energies of the mind must be gathered and poured on the theme of one's choice. And next is study. It is imperative that we know what we want to achieve, the path to it, the way others have had, what others have tell us. He is a foolish man who wants to learn everything from his experience. The wise man always learns from other people's experience. So we have to have study of books, study of those who have gone ahead of us, who can teach us. It is egoism, it is vanity to think that nobody can teach us anything in that sense. We always have things to learn every moment of our life from every direction. And this study of nature, study of books, study of life, that receptivity, mental application, that is a must. And last is to recognize that however clever we are, however gifted we are, the most that we can do is very little. The challenge of life, the nature of the quest is so vast that all that human nature and human potential can achieve is not adequate. So one learns to invoke a higher strength, a higher force, a higher consciousness into the situation, and one surrenders to the divine, who is the source and the reservoir of all the strength, the power, the consciousness that is needed. This recognition of the divine, a higher consciousness, a higher transcendental source, and surrender to it, that is a culmination of all these 10 steps. Let us assume that we complete the whole thing. This is not a thing to be done step by step. All the things are to be done simultaneously, and they have to be interwoven with our texture of life. Once we are reasonably certain that our life pattern conforms to these requirements, preliminary requirements, we have completed the round of the external discipline. Next comes the first step of the internal discipline, inner discipline, and first is posture. For a person who wants to meditate, it is necessary to have the right posture. By posture, I do not mean all those complicated 64 or 84 exercises that one does in Hatha Yoga, but they have got the specific purpose, they have got the utility, and it is a subject by itself which will take at least 2 hours for us to discuss even in outline. For purposes of meditation, we must have a posture. A posture is necessary because it is called asana in Sanskrit. Normally, our body, there is a certain rhythm established by nature. There is so much of flow of life energy as the body can bear, and in each person a balance is struck. In my present body, I can hold without spilling a certain amount of life energy. Now, that assumes that I am acting, that I am doing things in the normal course. What happens when I sit for 1 hour, not reading, not thinking, but quiet meditation? That life force which is not spent out gathers into the body, and you find the body shakes, or after 5 minutes we feel like shaking our fingers, our toes. There is a certain restlessness in the body. Now, a posture, a position has to be found by which the body can hold itself without moving for a considerable length of time, and that requires an ascertainment by each one which position is the most convenient, the most natural to him. For some, the cross-legged position sitting may be best. For some, sitting on a chair because they are accustomed to that kind of life, that may be. For some, standing erect, that may be the posture. My teacher Sri Aurobindo used to say that walking was his best asana, and he used to walk 7 miles a day in his room. Even when he had in his later years an accident and a fracture, he recovered and insisted on walking, first with the walking stick and then leaving the walking stick, 7 miles a day. And a deep furrow had been caused on the floor on which he was walking. And that was the period in which he would be meditating. Because meditation ultimately is an attunement of one's consciousness. And in which position is that best done, each one has to discover. That is why Swami Vivekananda, who first popularized these concepts in this country, he said, each person must discover his own asana. But whatever the asana, whatever the posture, the one fundamental requirement is one should be erect. Whether you sit on the floor or on the chair or you stand or walk, the whole frame must be erect. The spinal column must be erect, so that the ascent of energies from below or the descent of energies from above, there is no obstruction, there is only one channel. And they said the chest, the neck and the head must be in a straight line, erect. This is an important position, and you can be certain that you have found the right position when you can forget your body. When you sit in that position, you must be able to forget the body exists. The next step is, having taken the right position in which one can sit for a length of time without having to change positions, without feeling restlessness, without feeling discomfort, is to observe one's breathing. This is very important because most of us are not aware how irregularly we breathe. Last month or so, I was in Honsdale in the Himalaya Institute, where an American doctor showed me these statistics, because they are developing a therapy combining the yogic techniques and some of the medicinal requirements for promoting natural health. And in that process he showed me how 3 out of 4 people breathe incomplete. That is, they breathe half. They don't take full breaths. And this breathing from a particular incomplete imposes a great strain on the body, and it affects the lifespan, invites many diseases. If we observe, we are rarely aware whether both of our nostrils are breathing or only one, whether we breathe in a rhythmic way or irregularly. And this state of breathing has a direct connection with the state of our mind. If the mind is calm, cool, quiet, you will find our breathing is slow, regular and smooth. If the mind is agitated, depressed, anxious, not normal, immediately you find irregular breathing. Similarly, if the mind is restless, by controlling the breathing you can make the mind quiet. And this discovery of the perception of the ancients, they developed into what is called the science of breath. We call it in India pranayama, the elongation of breath. So one has to get that thread which controls the poise of the mind, the state of the mind, before one can meditate. And that is, you slow down your breath. Make it as slow as possible. And then you can discover where you are going fast, how you may breathe in slow, but how when you breathe out, you breathe it helplessly, rapidly. Having observed one's breath, deepen the breath, make it as slow as possible. And in that process, the mind gets quietened. The activity of the mind comes under control. And it is easier to gather one's thoughts. There are many techniques in this science of breath into which we don't need to enter. For us, the elementary principles of the breathing techniques, to make it as slow as possible and to equalize the in breathing and the out breathing. That is enough to start with. Next step is, supposing you take in the breath, say 2 units of time. You hold the breath for 2 units of time, and you take 2 units to begin with and develop into 4 units of time to leave it. That gives a tremendous vitality to the body, gives control to the body, and gives you a direction of the life force which you can direct wherever there is sickness, wherever there is weakness in the body, wherever there are what are called insufficiency diseases. The life breath can be directed, provided you have attained the control of life breath, and that is to breathing exercises. That is a very fascinating and interesting subject which has not yet received adequate attention in the West, but it has been developed, perhaps overdeveloped in some quarters in India, and it is worthwhile for those who are interested to explore the possibilities of applying the power of breathing for self-healing. And as far as meditation is concerned, we establish a certain rhythm in breathing. And the most easy one is to breathe through one nostril alone, say 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the evening, not necessarily for meditational purposes, for one's own health, to close one nostril and take a deep breath as slow as possible and let it out as slow as possible, say about 6 times. Then the same thing 6 times, then 6 times both together, but always to hold the chest erect. And the lower you have the source of breathing, the healthier you are and the more powerful you are. The Japanese, the whole science of the Japanese hara is that? Yes, is that they breathe from the abdomen, we breathe from the lungs. And that is why these it is rather ungainly it looks, because they concentrate too much upon it. But that is aside. Now, with these preparations, you come to a stage when you are comfortably seated, undisturbed, your mind has been brought to a certain control, and next step is to gather the 1,000 threads of mind, faculties, consciousness, which are spread, dispersed. They are brought together. Slowly they are brought together. And then they are brought into your focus. Once they are brought into your focus, you must have something on which to fix the faculties. You can't focus in a vacuum. So there are various ways, and this is called concentration. Concentration is different from meditation. Concentration is a fixation of attention, of energies on something, and that something can be a form that is pleasing to you, a sound that has meaning to you, an idea that appeals to you, a concept, a sentence, a formula, whatever it is, which provides a kind of a focusing point for your gathered mental energies. You have a sound like Om, for instance. You start mentally repeating Om, and that calms the being, silences the mind. And as you go on repeating it, dwelling upon the meaning and the significance of the word that you repeat, it creates waves and waves of the power. It releases like a spring the power that is inherent in it. Om is the mantra for liberation. And one feels breaking out of the finite conditions in which one normally lives. Or you have a beautiful picture, a picture of one who is God to you, or represents God to you, or reminds you of God. Well, you have that picture always and keep it before you, and that sticks, the whole thing holds, and your energies, your mind is fixed there. Or you have ideas, thoughts, God is love, God as peace, silence. So you have that concept fixed. But in the very nature of things, you can't stay fixed on any one thing for too long a time. It is an unnatural condition. So you just let go. Once it is brought to your attention and fixed, you let go. And when you let go, the mind continues to dwell on that, working out that thing. God has peace. So what is peace? Oh, that means what is not peace in me? What brings peace? How is peace reflected? How is peace organized? So that dwelling upon one idea, one form, one sound, but successively, so that the consciousness dwells upon it, releases itself without distraction from other factors. This is called meditation. Meditation is the continuous dwelling of one's consciousness on a chosen subject. And what happens as one develops this habit? One loses the awareness gradually of oneself. One becomes more and more fused with the object of meditation, so that in course of time, not only all thoughts and other things disappear, but you yourself disappear, and the knower becomes one with the known. If you are seeking the self, if you are seeking the peace, you become that. And that state is the fulfillment of meditation. When you become one, your whole consciousness is suffused and becomes one with the consciousness or the concept of what you meditate upon. And this condition is what is called trance. Trance is a condition of fixing yourself when your whole being and consciousness remains still in the object of meditation, blissfully unaware of all that is outside. And there is a gap between the surface being and the inner awareness. I think at this point we could stop usefully and develop the other implications of what we have been talking tomorrow. Now questions.
Would you talk about the relationship of some gurus who feel like you can only learn certain techniques of meditation through a guru-disciple relationship?
A guru is one who has realized in himself a certain truth. He has a realization, and he has the power to induce that realization in you. If he finds that you are fit for it, you are ready for it, he accepts you as his disciple and plants the seed of that realization in you, either by a look or by touch or by thought or by a word, which is called mantra. There are so many types of initiation. Initiation is establishing a connection and launching you on a career which is his, and he communicates that spark of his realization to you and gives you a certain practice. You do this. So each guru has his own brand of meditation, but he has found it useful, he has found it so each guru has his way, his technique, but meditation becomes easier if one is launched into meditation by somebody who does it already. Instead of each person having to discover what is natural to him, what is one's path, and what is the type of meditation, one who is already on the path, he can study and knows what will be your line. That means there is no such thing as mass initiation. Initiation is always individual. I don't know whether my answer meets your requirements.
So you're saying that there is a need for a guru-disciple relationship when you're ready?
Somebody who knows more than you. Somebody who knows more than you. But if you are prepared to do homework, if you are prepared to experiment and learn things, it is possible to practice self-observation, self-contemplation, and open to the divine consciousness which is spread everywhere, and launch oneself into meditation. But one must have the persistence, the grit, and the self-confidence, faith in oneself to do it.
Could you expand on that a little bit in the direction of entering the post-guru era of the sort of the historical changes that
Yes. The institution of gurus has become anachronistic at present, by now. It has served its purpose during so many thousands of years. But now when the human consciousness is so mature and developed, is on the verge of leaping into an area or belt of superhuman consciousness, we have to look into ourselves and see whether we really need to be always spoon-fed by other sources from elsewhere. Whether we can't discover the secret of ourselves, our true needs, our own rhythm by ourselves, by experimentation and naturally a certain amount of error. And the whole atmosphere is filled with the time spirit calling for decentralization. A guru means a terrific centralization of power, consciousness. 1,000 people around one person, always depending upon his slightest nod and gesture. And their whole lives are governed by one. This has led to certain evils. Evils, when the best of the gurus get spoilt, and they develop into maniacs. They forget why they came, what they started doing and what they are doing now. They forget their ideals, they forget their destinies and become exploiters. Human ego, the temptations of power, they are so great that it is very difficult to resist these temptations. Power, money, sex. These are the three powers of the adversary which are holding the whole world in their grip. And it need not be material power, it can be spiritual power, occult power, psychological power, any kind of power. It is very difficult for you to find gurus nowadays who have clearly transcended the reaches of these three elements. If you are that lucky, all good luck to you. Very difficult. And the ways in which the gurus can deceive themselves and deceive the disciples are infinite. Man's capacity to deceive oneself is endless. So we have to learn to depend upon ourselves, forge our own destiny, and you can always be sure that there is always a supporting and a helpful presence and power within you and above you. So you find the inner teacher, find the teacher who regards always what you are doing and he is helpful. And if you have that trust and faith, it will not be belied.
What about the guru who has already passed on out of his physical body?
That doesn't make much difference. He can guide, if he is a true guru, he can guide from whatever station above the physical universe for all time. A person, a guru who has realized the divine consciousness, he does not die. Only he has cast his physical form, but he continues to be alive. He continues to preside over this earth zone, cognize the calls, respond to the calls, help and play his part perhaps more effectively when freed from the trammels of the physical body than while in the body. That is why persons, like Buddha, Krishna, Jesus Christ, Rama, they are all living entities. It's not superstition. You call them, repeat their mantra, repeat what they have said, and you get the response. From where do you get the response? Those personalities which came for work on earth, they are still there without the physical body, and they will be there as long as the work for which they came is complete. They are called the eternals. The eternals. Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the relationship of Sri Aurobindo and the mother to this movement now today, like to Auroville and the work that's going on there?
The mother and Sri Aurobindo, you may say, are among the pioneers of what has developed today into a movement for new age, new consciousness. They were among the first in the early decades of the present century to say that man has arrived at his crossroads. He can't continue in the old way. He has to develop a new consciousness, add new faculties to himself which are waiting to be actualized. Man has ceased to be a mental man and develop into a spiritual man. Individual man has to develop into a universal man. And man has to develop an alternate way of life which is far from the old egoistic desire motivated life. So they called for a new economics, a new polity, and a new religion, a universal religion of humanity. Not a mental religion but a spiritual religion. And they tried and worked out this project in an ashram where we have about 1700 people permanently, with always a floating population between 200 to 300 people every day, purely with a yogic background, a spiritual basis, having satisfied themselves for 50 years that this is a viable and a workable thing. They started this planetary city called Auroville, where people are invited to join provided they are able to cut off from the old moorings, like the institution of private property, like individual families, and accumulation of wealth, and transcendence of the race and religious and national barriers. So those who are willing to subscribe to this ideal, operative as ideal of human unity, develop perfection of consciousness within, and integrating the society and the individual. So they are permitted to join this project, and we have about 500 people already from different parts of the country. Nearly 400 of them from foreign countries outside India. So running about 20 settlements, each with its own character, trying to produce what they need, but still dependent upon public donations, gifts of goodwill, and working out an order of life where money doesn't play a part. There is no money in the internal transactions of Auroville. Money comes in only when we try to trade what we produce to the outside world and get what we want, particular machinery, particular cement and steel and things for construction purposes. Developing a new type of education. All the world over, the system of education has failed. So everywhere they are doing new experiments. And there they are experimenting based on the values of the soul and freedom of the child and claim of the child to be consulted in its own growth. Where parents, the society, which means there the government, and the children, they are all teachers, parents and the students, they are all involved with equal responsibility in every educational program. These things are being tried, but the one important thing that I would like to invite your attention to is, neither in the ashram nor in the Auroville is there a head. There is no boss, to use the colloquial language. They are self-governing communities with no provision for dissent. Things just don't move if you are disagreed. So it does bring a pressure if we want things to move, to agree somewhere, have a consensus, and not sulk and walk away in a huff if your opinions are not accepted, but you just give a chance to others. So that much of goodwill, that much of tolerance is necessary, and for all that the ego has to go. So it is only a spiritual basis, in my opinion, which can ensure the growth and progress of communities. There are enough experiments on political basis, political ideologies like the communist, the socialist, the laissez-faire. There are enough experiments on economic basis, simple barter system, this way, that way. But they all go some way, but not the whole way. It is only a spiritual basis that can give the right foundation for these things to develop. I was mentioning the other day what Sri Aurobindo observed. He said that the French Revolution failed because while it gave liberty, it destroyed equality. A powerful minority started tyrannizing over the majority, and it called forth a counter-revolution. The Bolshevist revolution failed because it gave equality but destroyed liberty, destroyed freedom. So he says a true revolution can come only when the third value of fraternity is worked out. That should be the first. When fraternity is accepted and worked out, equality and liberty are spontaneous results. And that fraternity, sense of brotherhood, sense of belonging to each other, one universe, one humanity, that can come only when one realizes that imperative here, not in the mind but in the heart, and that is a spiritual change. Naturally, to bring about a spiritual change, a psychological education is necessary, a psychological climate is necessary, but ultimately all those ideas and theories and doctrines have to be worked out here, in our own homes, in our little societies. We have to work it out. There are challenges every day. We don't recognize them. We can test how far we are sincere in professing fraternity, in professing brotherhood. That requires a spiritual change. So Sri Aurobindo and Mother are among those who say without a spiritual change in the individual, you can't bring about any change in society or anywhere. Yes.
When you were talking about vegetarian, non-vegetarian food, everything has its purpose and importance on the planet.
Yes.
So why would you consider plant life as a lower form of life than the animal life?
Because the consciousness has not yet reached the stage of articulation, and the purpose of plant life is to provide food. I don't know whether you will find it difficult to accept, but I have heard those who know the occult language, the occult sense of things, testifying to the fact that fruits when they are ripe, plants when they are ripe, they seek to be taken and eaten. They tell, we are ready. My teacher, the mother, she had cultivated a garden when she was in Japan during the First World War, a beautiful garden, because she was very much impressed by the Japanese aesthetics, and she lived there for 4 years. And every morning when she went into the garden, she would say, certain vegetables, certain plants would shrink and say, no, not today, not today. Some others would say, eat me today, take me. and she would cut them. Similarly, the flowers, they would wave. Those who are ready to come in the vase, they would be waving. The others would wait. Because she knew she had that entry into the occult sense of things. And this has been testified by others also. They are there, they want to be eaten, they want to provide food. Their purpose in nature is that. But the purpose of animals is certainly not to provide food for you and me. They live for their own propagation, they are for their own species, they have their own way. And you would be interested to know, in one part of India, to meet this craze for the legs of frogs in America, one corporation was started, and they hunted out these frogs from wherever they are in that rainy, watery marsh, cut out the legs. Even before killing the frogs, they threw them that sideway, and all the things were being shipped to America. I don't know for what purpose, how they eat it here. And ultimately, after 2-3 years, it was found that all the crops in those areas would die. They wouldn't come up at all. Then some agricultural scientists were brought from one of the universities, and they found that certain insects or worms which are being normally eaten by frogs, they thrived when the frogs were removed, and they damaged all the plants. So the frogs also have a purpose. So everything has a purpose, true. But we interfere with the economy of nature. We interfered there, and all the crops failed, and there was a famine condition. I suppose all these factors have to be taken into consideration.
You have much thoughts on eating raw food compared to cooked food?
There are many foods which in cooking they lose their properties, and they had best be eaten raw. But certain foods are difficult to be digested in the raw. Those we cook, boil. But I prefer the Western way of cooking because you don't interfere too much. We in the East, we spice them. We overcook, we add 100 ingredients, and to make it tasty, kill all the food properties. So we are a famous people who are said to be eating empty food. And I do think certain things have to be eaten raw best, and certain things boiled or cooked. Yeah?
It seems to me I read somewhere where there were a group of anthropologists that made a statement that man was not meant to be a carnivore, that his whole system and his jaw and his teeth formations were not made for tearing meat like animals do, that he was born to be a fruitarian. This was a statement they flatly made. It seemed to me that
I think so. It is a very perceptive discovery, and I think it is true. Otherwise our mouth and everything would have been differently shaped if we are meant to eat flesh. But man is doing many things which he should not. He is not expected to do,
Would you repeat the rhythm of breath in meditation?
It is before you start meditation, or early in the morning, or in the evening, when you want to be gathered, to be properly focused, One way is you sit erect and close one nostril. This should be straight, and take deep breath. You follow me? at least 6 times, and then this side 6 times, and then sit like this 6 times with both the breaths. You will find a subtle change in your mind, in your psychological system. This is one. Another technique is, say, you take 2 units of time to breathe in slowly. Hold it for 2 units. Let it out, if possible, in 4 units. Try. Next step is, when you leave out the breath, don't take in breath immediately. Leave the breath outside. So there are 4 stages: in breathing, suspension, out breathing, vacancy. This is another circle. So it depends upon our age, upon our capacity to do things. If it is overdone, the balance is upset. And this is, some people do it for hours. And those, they find their sources of inspiration and poetry, art, and suddenly open. And they are amazed at what they can do. Because this opens up various channels and windows in our own being, which are normally clogged. We have in India the system of what is called, the subtle channels are always clogged with our desires, excitements, tensions. They are all clogged. So the life force doesn't enter. And either you feel heavy there, or you feel dull there, or you say those things are not working. But when you practice the science of breath, the breathing, all those channels open up. And you begin to function at something like your possible optimum. Very few of us live even to the 1/3 of our normal potential capacity. We don't. We have no time. We are hurried. How many of us can eat food normally? It is an important injunction in spiritual life. That is, when you eat food, don't talk. Food is something sacred. Something sacred. So, when the food is brought, it is served, there is a spontaneous prayer of gratitude on the part of the being to all those who have made it possible to have that plate of nourishment for the body. Those who have grown, those who have cooked, those who have served. A spontaneous gratitude. After the human level of gratitude is expressed, you offer gratitude to God, to the divine. There is a divine presence as a digestive fire in each body. It is called the Vaishvana, or the universal fire, Godhead of fire. And one offers the food to that fire of digestion inside each person. And when it is offered, it is taken as a living of grace. And one eats it, carefully digesting. What mother used to call the chemistry of food, seeing where there is resistance to what kind of food, where we have to stop. The body is so sensitive that it always gives a signal where one has to stop. But we have so many considerations. Somebody has taken a lot of pains to cook, or I have my own greed for food. And I ignore those warnings, ignore those signals, and I go on eating. Now all this, in an awakened life, all this has to stop. So these are small details of life which enter into legitimate concerns of a seeker. We take things for granted. So we ruin our own health by our inconsiderateness to ourselves, our body, our life force, our mind. We refuse to take pains to breathe properly. So the life force doesn't get opportunity to activize our bodies as much as it could. So, in any kind of spiritual life, this total approach, what is fashionably called holistic approach, is a must. Nothing is complete unless all is complete. Everything affects everything else. It is one scheme, one truth, one life, one consciousness. There is no area of life which can be treated as insignificant or too small a matter to be of concern to an important seeker like me. Everything has importance. And if you observe things, every event of life, every circumstance of life has a lesson. It takes place because it has something to teach you. This awareness, vigilance is a must on the part of a seeker. I am mentioning all this because our subject is concerned not only in meditation but spiritual life as well. So these are all parts of spiritual life. It depends upon our approach. Food is not all important. Food can't become a fad. I have known many people whose consciousness is full of calories. They say so many calories of this thing, so many calories of that. It becomes a fad. They have time for nothing else. It is self-defeating. But it has a value. You have to give its due the sense of proportion, harmony. I was explaining the other day to another meeting. My teacher used to say that perfection is not a maximum. It is not an extreme, but it is the optimum harmonization of circumstances prevailing at that time. Maximum harmonization, not maximum, optimum harmonization. So today's perfection will be exceeded by tomorrow's perfection.
Suppose one feels the necessity of hunting up one of these anachronistic gurus. One doesn't feel that you can go on your own yet. You still need some help. Would you say something about the marks that one should perhaps look for in a guru so as not to be trapped in a false...
Very good. It's a very good question. Very good question. It's a long time since I've been asked such important questions. And that is, I described the other day in the meeting in Seattle how a guru is a child leading children, a light kindling other lights, a power of God calling other powers to God. That is a guru, that is a teacher. He is humble, he never claims. His way of working is not through speech, not through teaching, but by example, by influence. He emanates an influence. By that people learn a certain warmth, and the one characteristic sign is, in the presence of a genuine teacher, you feel peace, tremendous peace and sense of purity. One who is not really, I won't say a phony teacher, but who is yet an unbaked guru, you may feel excitement, you may feel a sense of power, you may feel I am big, I am great, I am going to do big things, full of energy. That is not a spiritual sign necessarily. In the presence of him you feel pure, purified, peaceful, and an intense urge to surrender yourself to the divine, not to the teacher, but to the divine. And a teacher, he will always try to link you with your own divinity, with your own inner teacher. When he tries to gain power or extend his empire in different areas of your life, you can be sure he is not a genuine teacher. Humility, humbleness. The more one is spiritual, the more one becomes humble. There is more of humility. Arrogance, claim to be the Messiah, to be the Savior, to be the teacher, to have something which everybody should take. All these are egoistic signs, pseudo teachers. A real teacher will not want to become a teacher. It is thrust upon them. Real gurus are not man-made gurus, not made by American organizers. You know, I have known many people who came as simple people. Some organizers, American organizers, take hold of them, put through all programs on TVs and this thing, and they get swollen heads, and they develop into gurus within 6 months. When I saw them next, they had orange robes. They were stenotypists in India. And yes, many of these people, they have no following in India. Nobody looks at them twice. I know among my friends who have become like that. Well, they just hint to me, don't spoil our trade. All right. I have seen not only in America, outside in Germany, in France, everywhere. The thing is, well, it is that, but these are the signs. You know, the godly signs. Sri Aurobindo has a poem, God, the master of all, the servant of love. That's the thing. Whoever reflects something of God, he, whatever is inner master, he is the servant of love. He is to serve. He feels fulfilled in your growth and in your greatness. He doesn't seek to exercise dominion over others, build an empire. No, it is not. One has that, intuitive perception. This is genuine or not. The test is whether you feel more peace and more purity in you. That agitation, excitement, vitality, increase, it is given by sub-spiritual sources, what are called vital beings. The beings of the life world, or those who are open to the dominion of ego and vitality. They can make you feel very big, full of power and verve. And many times the disciples of such gurus are a more danger than the gurus themselves. It is with that angle that there are very few genuine gurus left in the world now, simply because there is no need. It is a generation, that is an institution that will pass. But we can always have guides. Those who have something to teach, those who have something to communicate, but no more. We go to expert doctors, expert physicians, scientists, technical people. Similarly, those who have something to know of spiritual technology, yes, they don't become your gurus, they can be instructors, they can be guides. We have in India many institutions teaching this breathing techniques, asanas, helping in studies, but nobody looks upon them as gurus. They are revered as teachers, that's all.
That would be the connection between your question about how to meditate, you need a teacher or not, and his question about the post-guru, that you need a guide, but you don't need a guru.
How do you come upon a spiritual practice that fits yourself and like do you read it in books and then become an experiment?
We have to, at times there is a strong affinity. One feels a strong affinity to a particular line of practice. That is usually an indication the direction of the fulfillment of one's nature. One has to try, because at times these affinities may be very superficial attractions, depending upon so many other extraneous considerations. But after a few experiments, one has to fix in something, and it is at that stage one can take the advice of somebody in whose judgment you have trust. For instance, there is the path of knowledge, path of devotion, path of action, path of concentration on breath, things like that. There are so many lines and lines of spiritual progress. There is also a synthesis. One has an integration of different processes. But one has to see which is one's strong point and start there, whether in the heart or in the mind, or if one's willpower and practical turn is very strong, it should be in works for God in humanity. Learning non-selfish works, pouring one's energies in a disinterested way. One learns to consecrate one's energies to the divine. That is called karma yoga.
This new community that you were talking about that has 400 or 500 people, is that in India?
Yes. It is 7 miles from our ashram. It is a kind of extension of our ashram, you know. It is a kind of extension. And it is a growing community. It is in South India near Pondicherry.
Do you see transplanting that type of community to other countries?
Yes. That is only a prototype, and we are hoping that similar ventures and projects will be started in various countries. And 100 such experiments will evolve something truly viable, provide an alternative to the modern society, which is now fumbling. I suppose that will be the subject for our next talk in the evening. I don't want to exhaust it.
Do you think the United States is ready for that type of
Yes, only they should not be big communities. They should be small communities, each with an individuality of its own, a stress of its own, not dependent upon the personality of a founder. You know, but America is ready more than any other country, because among the youth here there is a realization that the old order will not serve anymore. And this revolt, you know, takes all kinds of forms, but it has to be given a constructive channel. Simply to have a community for a community doesn't serve a purpose. We must have an ideal and work for it. And for that, in my opinion, a spiritual commitment of each member is essential before one can be member of a community. You want a community for what? Just to work out a harmonious economic order of living, or to develop a new consciousness, a new way of relating to each other. The group relationships are the one area where humanity has not made progress still. Individually we may be highly developed and evolved, cultured, but taken in this group context we are all primitives. We all think of ourselves first. After my interests are assured, I think of my neighbor. I think some of you may have heard, some 2 or 3 years ago, some section of the UNESCO, it sent a directive, a questionnaire, to educationists in different parts of the world, asking them to put this question to their students of a particular grade. And that was, when you are playing, say baseball or football or whatever game, the ball goes and hits the neighbor's window, the glass breaks. What are you going to do when the glass breaks of the neighbor? So the students of Russia, they said, we don't know what we will do. Some of the students in America, some schools, they said we will run away. You see, students of some country in the East, they said we will go to the neighbor, knock at his door and apologize. Now the experts in psychology and education who are invited to respond, they said this is clearly hypocritical. What the American students have said, that's the truth. The first reaction of human nature is to run away. That at that age children will be that responsible to go to the neighbor and apologize? No. They are just repeating what they have been taught in the school. They won't do that. See, that way we have to be true to our nature, and we have to orientate our nature spiritual toward the spirit, and each one has to commit oneself to a spiritual ideal and undertake to work to bring about that spiritual change in oneself. And only such people can create a new community. I must feel your need and then do things for you. I should not wait to be told of your need. I should not do it because the Bible tells me, or more ethics demands that of me. And this is the meaning of fraternity. Here there is the potentiality in this country. The individuals are ready in all countries, but in such large numbers, it's not in any other country. The other day we attended a conference of 45 communities. What is that place?
Oh, Brighton, Hot Springs in Oregon.
Yes. And it was an experience. Very few had an idea of what they are doing and where they are going. All that they were pleased about was that they were making a new thing, new step, they were new departure. And it was news to them when I told that we must have a spiritual basis. Without that you will die, the community will die. Economic adjustment, social adjustment, they don't solve the essential problem.
It seems to me that has to happen in the primary relationship, the family and the marriage, before it can happen in a community.
That's right, that's right. But our blood relationships and things as they are so much self-centered, The house is no longer treated as a laboratory for this kind of experiment. But I personally believe that where there are families, there are ideal environments where this kind of thing can be practiced. Though you may say, cynics will say it is extended selfishness. You love your own children, your own wife, what's there wonderful about it? If you can really love and serve those who are not related to